Welcome to the Family Tree Magazine podcast. This is the show from America's #1 genealogy magazine. I'm Lisa Louise Cook. Well, today I'm excited because we get to dive into a topic that every genealogist, whether beginner or seasoned, will find invaluable: the best online tools for tracing your roots. Joining us is David Fryxell. He's the author of Family Tree Magazine's highly anticipated article each year. And this year it is the 101 best genealogy websites of 2025. Dave's curated list highlights the top free and subscription-based websites, from heavyweights like Ancestry and Family Search to hidden gems like DNA Painter and Chronicling America, and a lot more. Welcome back to the podcast, Dave.
Thanks for having me.
So your article, it's titled Boldly Go. Of course, I always love a great Star Trek reference. And it's so appropriate because technology, and specifically artificial intelligence, are dominating websites this year. So let's start there. Tell us about the impact that you're seeing as you're reviewing the website landscape. Tell us about that impact that AI is having.
Well, it's interesting. It was not really something that I had given a lot of thought to in terms of genealogy. Of course, we hear about it with, Chat GPT, and, you can't do Google anymore without getting their Gemini thing. And, it just seems everywhere. But I hadn't really thought about it as a, genealogy thing. But indeed, it's sort of coming, into our world too. Family Search, for example, has used AI to make documents searchable that previously were unsearchable. The chore of actually indexing these things would have been impossible for mere humans, but apparently machines can do it. MyHeritage is using AI to animate old photos, which some people may find a little creepy, to be honest. It's like suddenly, grandma's like, I don't know, moving. But, it is what it is. Extracting info from old newspapers. And we can talk about that more in a minute. The old newspapers thing from MyHeritage, I've gotten a lot out of for my own genealogy that, I guess without AI, maybe we never would have found. Ancestry has a new beta tool called AI Assistant that can sort of answer general family history and DNA-related questions. In fact, some genealogists are even using ChatGPT and other chatbot type AI clients to dig into their family history and do the research for you. I've never tried that, I confess, but maybe you and I are just going to be obsolete now because AI is going to do everything.
Yeah, sometimes it feels that way, but as I often tell my listeners, we can kind of think of AI as being a competent assistant, but one that needs to be checked.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Well, and it's sort of almost like AI is sort of like pedigree charts online in that sense,
Yeah.
Oh, look, I've traced my, genealogy back to Charlemagne. Great. Well, maybe not. So you need to check that just like you need to check AI.
Exactly. Well, you mentioned some of the really big genealogy websites, and you kind of start the article off there, but then you touched on newspapers, and I see you have a whole section on newspapers. Tell us about some of your favorite websites there.
Well, it's really interesting. I think, when we were first starting out, newspapers were not really a really important source. You had your census records, you got vital records, maybe some church records, even land records. But newspapers, what's that gonna add up to? But increasingly, there are more newspaper sites, so that must be popular. And we've added a few over the years. There's not new this year, but I think last year this thing called Arcanum Newspapers even covers newspapers in Europe. So if you have European ancestors, as so many do, you can use that. Chronicling America, of course, from the Library of Congress just keeps expanding. We've had Genealogy Bank on there for ages, but it's still, useful paid site. I think last year, the Newspaper Archive, which was more of an industry type publication for the data industry, came out for the general public, and it's got like 16,000 titles and 200 million. All these have enormous numbers of, pages. Ancestry, of course, has had newspaper.com, which just keeps adding stuff. And then the two new ones this year in the newspaper category, I mentioned Old News, great name, which is from MyHeritage, and already has 12 language options and hundreds of millions of pages. And what is cool is because MyHeritage is very good about scouring your uploaded family tree and then sending you emails, possibly even too many emails, about its finds. Now it's started including old news in that. And so I just subscribed to old news for the first time this year. And every week or so, I'm finding something in there. It's usually not like, groundbreaking for me, like, oh my gosh, I never realized, but they're little bits and pieces or relatives I didn't know, like umpteenth cousins or something that I'm able to catch up on because of old news. And it's not just obituaries. I've also found that they will capture things that run more around the turn of the last century, where there used to be a lot of genealogy stuff in the newspaper. So, it'd be a brief history of the Overton family, blah, blah, blah. And again, you got to take those with a grain of salt. But I do a talk on using published sources. And this next time I do it, I'm going to have to add old newspapers, which had never occurred to me. Usually it's books and journals and that sort of thing. So, that's pretty cool. The other new one is a thing from Veridian Software. You may remember there was a site called Elefind, which was kind of cool. And we used to have it on our list. But they've been busy digitizing historic newspapers and academic collections. And so they're basically putting some of their clients' stuff online. And so I found Colorado historic newspapers. There are a lot of student publications, like student newspapers, which that's certainly a source that I've never thought of, but you can find your college ancestors perhaps there. Some church archives, even the National Library of Estonia is on there. So it's a interesting and I suspect constantly growing, collection of really cool stuff online. And yeah, I've just been amazed at how much I found in old newspapers.
Yeah, I totally agree. And of course, they're a secondary source, so we take them, like you say, with a grain of salt. But there's so many clues there that we can have. And Veridian's really interesting because, they are a software company. They're just making accessible some of their client databases, which I think many of these would not even come across our radar. They wouldn't be on the first page of Google results necessarily, but they're fascinating and they're free. A lot of them are free. We love old newspapers, but since you kind of have this tech theme going, let's talk about the genealogy tech tools section of your list. What are some of the newest and most exciting ones that you came across?
Well, there are two ones that are new to the list. We listed under tools for success. One is called birthparentfinder.com, and it's one of the rare things to help adoptees trace their family. So it brings together. It's got consulting services and also DNA testing. There's a blog, search strategies, success stories. So if you're in that community where you're trying to find birth parents, it's really worth a look. And again, there's not a lot out there that directly aims at that, audience. For more hardcore genealogists, there's something called Cite Builder, CITE Builder. It helps you craft well-formatted citations. So you choose the type of record, fill in the details, choose a style. The basic edition is free. If you're really into it, you can do a premium for I think $20 a year. But it's a neat little thing for those of us who have trouble figuring out how. Okay, I got this fact from this source. How exactly should I record this in my genealogy software or whatever?
Yeah, that's a great one. In fact, we are featuring them in our Best Websites podcast in August. So we'll have a link for that in the show notes. That's a really great site that has a sole purpose of helping you overcome this intimidation that comes sometimes with source citation, and they make it so easy.
Yeah, it's interesting in the list you'll find the very broad researchy type things like the ancestry and family search. But then we've also included some that are, really targeted like that aim at a particular problem and try to solve it. A lot of, research tools and things that are aimed to make your, genealogy life easier, even if they're not directly serving up, records and data.
I notice here also, of course, you've got your genetic genealogy section. What are some of the highlights there?
Well, let's see. I think you know all about DNA Painter. You mentioned, which is just visually very cool. It has color coded family trees, genetic ancestor marking, all kinds of options there to make DNA studies a little bit easier because it certainly can be complicated and confusing. So it's nice to have some tools to help. Of course, there's GEDmatch, which got a lot of attention a few years ago because it would help solve cold cases. And even if you're not looking to solve, decades old murders, it can help you find your ancestors. And you can upload your data from any of the most popular testing services. There are like 2 million people using it, 45 different tools, and 400 million people in their files. And if you want, you can opt to have your data included the next time they try to, solve a cold case. What they've done in that, of course, just as an aside, is pretty amazing. Where they pick up some thing from a trash can, and it turns out that what the genealogist came up with in narrowing who the killer might be, turns out to be right, and then they go in and make the arrest, and suddenly genealogy gets a little cooler.
Oh, yeah. It's absolutely amazing how it has transformed the criminal cold case area. I noticed here, too, that you've got so many great categories. You've got military records and UK and Irish and European genealogy websites. How about you just tell us, as we wrap up, some of your favorite sites that you've either added or that have been longstanding pillars within your list?
Well, I think I don't have Irish ancestors that I know of, but one of the really cool ones is that we had maybe last year is the Virtual Record Treasury of Ireland, where apparently the public record office building there was destroyed in 1922, I think in one of the uprisings. And they've recreated the building, in effect, so you would do a virtual walkthrough of it in order to access the records. I mean, that's really just a cool idea. So even if you're not Irish, it's kind of fun to play around with.
Oh, yeah.
Then being half Swedish and having done a book on Scandinavian genealogy, of course, I got to point out the Scandinavia ones. And I've long been a subscriber and just renewed to the Swedish site called Archive Digital, which really is a terrific site. It's very expensive, I think, but you get all the records in color and everything. But we recently added, I think again last year, Riksarkivet, which is the Sweden National Archive, which is sort of catching up in terms of records and might be worth a look before you shell out for the other one, because that one, of course, is free. So it's nice to see more and more free sites and, they're putting lots and lots of data up.
Yeah, great point. And of course, you start off with US, Canadian, and Caribbean. So, I mean, there is something here for everybody. You got to love the passenger list and the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island website, the New York Historical Vital Records Project, and of course, the National Archives. I think that's one of the sites that oftentimes either isn't on people's radar as a first go-to, or when they get there, it's a little intimidating to try to find stuff. But it is jam-packed with America's most important records.
And I think initially people are sort of disappointed because either, as you say, it's a little difficult to navigate and it doesn't have everything. I mean, the sort of stuff that you expect from like Ancestry or Find My Past or even Fold 3, a lot of that stuff has been outsourced or is elsewhere. But it still does have some, really cool stuff, as well as a lot of helpful guides to the records and things that you can find. And we'll even point you to, like Ancestry or Find My Past or whatever.
Right, because they're partnering with all those big companies, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I've noticed lately they've been sending out emails that they have some free genealogy webinars. And what's nice about theirs is they are specifically tailored to helping you explore and find the records that you need from their website. So it's very specific to the National Archives website.
Right. And we should also point out the Canadian version of it, the Library and Archives Canada, which does have a huge amount of records, including censuses and everything. And I often point out to people who they can't find their ancestors when they came through Ellis Island because maybe they didn't. And it's really worth checking there to see if maybe your ancestors came in through Canada, because they have some very good passenger records there. And so if that's been your brick wall, and you may not think you have Canadian ancestors, but if that's been your brick wall, you might just find the answer to that. I found one of my wife's Norwegian relatives who you'd think they just come to the United States, but nope, they came through Canadian port. And I finally found them.
Yes. Actually, there's a situation like that in my husband's family, too. I have to bring up, you put US Gen Web on here, and I just think about way back when, the internet first getting started and Ancestry came online. US Gen Web has been out there for a long time. It's usgenweb.org, and it's still a top player, isn't it?
It really is. The structure of it is so neat because they have, you can click on a state, and then you can click on the county. And a lot of counties still, have individual administrators who they're very helpful. They put up, records. So for any sort of research in the United States, and of course, again, it's all free. So if you suddenly find that, you have an ancestor in, Podunk County, South Dakota, there might be a Podunk County, US Gen website and some helpful person there who, you may even be able to contact them and say, where would the vital records be, or whatever happened to that courthouse, or, those sort of mysteries. So it's really is a great resource. And a few things still on the internet, it's done by volunteers, really out of the goodness of their hearts and interest in genealogy. So that's great to see.
Those are really people who are experts on the ground, usually maintaining those. Well, the list is tremendous. Again, we're talking about David Fryxell's article called "To Boldly Go." It is the 101 best websites for genealogy for 2025. I have to tell you, Dave, I was sharing in one of my Genealogy Gems videos with my viewers how I love to use the Chrome browser, and I will make folders, on my bookmark bar. And I thought, this list, you pick a category that you need, like historical newspapers. You just go visit each one, drop it in your little folder, and then they are one click away on your web browser, no matter where you are. We can take your list with you all year long.
That's a great tip, actually. I'll have to try that.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Well, anything else I didn't ask you about that you'd love to share with the listeners about your list, or what you might expect for the future genealogy websites?
Well, I guess I'd say that, it just keeps growing, and they keep being able to go farther and farther back.
Yeah.
When I was talking to my old boss at Family Tree Magazine, who hasn't been with it either for a long time, and he said at one point when they were looking to sell the company, one of the potential buyers, some hedge fund, didn't quite understand this Family Tree Magazine thing, because he said, well, once you do your genealogy, then you're done, right? Why do you need a magazine? Well, obviously things change as with 101 best websites, there's more stuff coming out all the time. And unless you've traced it back to Adam and Eve, you probably still need the magazine, and you probably still need the 101 best websites.
Well, and even if we have a tree full of names and dates, it's the depth of the stories that are becoming known to us through all this additional content that just keeps coming online or being made available and searchable. So at least you know where to go find it offline. So I agree. There's never a stopping point because the stories have so much richness and depth to them. Always good to talk to you. Thank you so much, Dave Fryxell, for joining us here on the podcast. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Family Tree Magazine podcast. This is the show from America's #1 genealogy magazine. I'll have links to everything that we've talked about today on the show over at the show notes page, and you can find that at familytreemagazine.com/podcast. And there you'll also find a huge back catalog of past episodes full of topics that are going to help you in your genealogy research. And when you stop by the website, be sure to sign up for our free newsletter. That really is the perfect way to stay in touch with Family Tree Magazine and get all the latest and greatest news, plus the announcements of each and every new podcast episode. I'm Lisa Louise Cook, and I hope that you'll come by and visit me at my website, genealogygems.com, and there you will find the Genealogy Gems podcast and a link over to our Genealogy Gems YouTube channel. So until next time, have fun climbing your family tree.